All right, well, we are at 12, and I don't want to take any time away from our amazing presenters. So, hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center, and you have found your way to the TLC Professional Development Series, and we're so excited to have you. I know many of you have come to this already, lots of familiar faces. I love to see that. But for anyone watching asynchronously, glad you're watching. And we archive all of our events for asynchronous viewing later. So if you want to go back and review how well y'all did today, for instance, in your presentation today, Mariya and Brent, you have that opportunity to do that. You can share it with whoever you want to kind of do that. We have professional development certificates that you can earn both as graduate students or as faculty or staff. My TLC colleagues have just dropped the information to that in the chat. For those of you who are faculty, if you want to become a Teaching and Learning Center fellow, we also have the opportunity for you to do that. So you can check that out. But it's really important for us that we extend excellence in teaching throughout K-State and that we're all doing it great. I always kind of announce the ones next week before we get to the one this week. Next week, Camilla Roberts from the Office of Integrity is going to come and talk about academic integrity issues and all of that. And if you're worried like I am about AI writing papers now and stuff like that, be great to kind of come and hear Camilla Roberts' ideas on that. So I'm excited for that for next week. And it's always noons on Wednesday over Zoom. So if you found us today with this link, find us next week with that same link. The IT people don't like the security on that, but we'll cross our fingers that that's okay. So now, without further ado, we have an amazing presentation today. Some people doing amazing things as part of K-State First. I'll let you tell them what that is. But basically, they make sure that first-year students here at K-State have amazing educational experiences. And we ask them to come share some of the lessons that they would have. So Mariya, Vaughn, Brent Weaver, the floor is yours.
Awesome.
What a great greeting, Don. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I am going to go ahead and share my screen, if that's all right, Don. Cool. Excellent, excellent. Everybody still see that okay? Cool. It's been a little while since I've done a full presentation on Zoom, so just gonna do some check-ins here and there, make sure active things are still happening. So our presentation today is finding your 1001st idea, strategies for supporting first-year students in the classroom. And we're specifically focused on kind of first-year students because that is where our expertise lies. But I think a lot of these activities and strategies will help any student that you might work with in the classroom. So you can tailor it to your own needs throughout. So we're going to start out just with some welcome and introductions. So what our session is going to look like today is we're going to focus in and see what some of the concerns and challenges your students have been facing as part of our introductions. We're going to help you kind of find your framework. What would you like to take away from this session today? And we're going to focus that on kind of 4 main categories that we've narrowed down on. So we do a lot of different work within our kind of K-State work, K-State First framework, but we wanted to kind of narrow it down a little bit for y'all today. So, and then we should have some time for question and answer and just some discussion at the end too. So in the chats as part of our introductions, and so we can see kind of who's with us today and what concerns you're bringing to us, we'd love for you to share your name, the classes that you teach, and then some concerns or challenges that you've seen facing your first year students in particular or your students in general. So we'll just give you kind of a minute or two to fill that out. And then Brent and I will introduce ourselves a little bit more formally.
I love seeing the looks of concentration on y'all as you're typing into the chat. I see the teacher preparation faces.
All right. Awesome. So if you're still finishing up, that's totally fine. But yeah, I see a lot of kind of concerns about like transitioning, right, from kind of high school learning into college level learning, students figuring out, and you as teachers and professors and instructors figuring out what their level of learning is at. Managing a lot of different responsibilities, right? Managing kind of that classroom expectations as well as like co-curricular activities. So there's kind of a lot going on in students' lives, right? I think we'll be able to address a lot of these kind of challenges and concerns. So I am Mariya Vaught. I'm the Assistant Director of K-State First. I'm joined by my colleague, who I will let introduce himself.
Hey, y'all. I'm Brent Weaver. I also work with K-State First as the Learning Assistant Coordinator. So I coordinate our peer mentorship program as my primary responsibility, in addition to some teaching.
Yeah, so some of the challenges when we were thinking about this session, our first year students we've noticed facing are kind of difficulty connecting to others, rigorous coursework, right, or new kinds of studying. They're overwhelmed, right, by the amount of homework, co-curricular activities, and a lot of things that are happening on campus. A lot of mental health concerns come up for our students, and financial concerns are a big one for our first year students as well. So framework, kind of figuring out what we do, how we do it, and then what you want to take away from what we'll be discussing today. So K-State First, for those of you who don't know, is the first year experience here on campus. So we want to support students' academic success, help them with that transition to college level learning and college life. We have 3 core programs. The first are our learning communities, or our CAT communities. We have first year seminar courses, and then we also are the home to the K-State First Book program. So the 4 kind of ways that we help students transition to college level learning and college life is we foster campus community and feelings of belonging. We raise academic expectations with engagement and compassion. We want to empower students with a strong sense of personal responsibility and social agency, and offer opportunities for diverse activities and interactions. So that's our core kind of mission as K-State First, and what we imbue into those 3 programs. Oops. Oh. So the 4 topics that we've narrowed down to discuss today are how to build community within the classroom, communication and empathy, technology and the flexibility that technology allows us, and then how to help students connect to resources outside of us, because some of these things we're not experts in, right? So mental health concerns, right? Financial concerns, but there are experts on campus that can absolutely help with some of those things. So we want to make sure that we get students connected to those resources in a timely manner. So how do we do that, right? So those are kind of the 4 components and topics that we'll be focused on today.
So as I was like reading y'all's responses to the opening question, what my mind immediately was thinking about was that in some ways, a lot of what you shared fit into one, or in some cases, all of these categories that Mariya has just described. So we're going to do a waterfall activity. So the goal with this is that you're going to type something, but not click send until I say so. And we just have 2 questions for you. So the first one is really to help us narrow our focus for today's session and time. So from those 4 areas that Mariya described, which is the one that you would like to focus on and create a strategy for today? And for that particular thing, either what is a strategy that you have used, or what might be one that you would like to use? And it's okay if these are like workshopped ideas, right? That's the purpose of our time together. So let's take just about, I'll give us a minute or 2 to just type our responses, but not click send quite yet. And then I will let you know when to say, when to click go. So I've just looked at my clock. So I will have us go here in about a minute. So again, which area would you like to focus on? And what is a potential?
Can we see that slide?
Yeah.
Can we see those 4 areas again? Thank you.
Yeah. Mariya, would you be able to take us back 1 slide? Awesome. So yes, which of these areas would you like to focus on? And what might be a strategy for engaging with that? And I'll type these instructions in the chat as well.
So while we have a second, is anyone else seeing like these weird black squares on top of the PowerPoints as they're doing that?
I think that's Mariah's
Yes.
drop down of our pictures.
Okay, all right. So I was like, either that or I got to get my laptop checked.
Is that better?
It's mostly better, yes.
Okay. Yeah, that was me looking at people. I can hide it. I don't need to see folks
Good
in
catch,
this
Sarah.
particular moment.
Oh, but Mariah, that sounded so sad. It
I
sounded
know.
like you did need to see us.
I feel a little bit lonely, but
We're here for
for
you.
this moment right now, I'll hide it.
We can feel each other's presence virtually through the abyss.
Yeah.
All right, y'all, let's take about 15 seconds and then I will tell you when to hit send. All righty, y'all, go ahead and click send. All right. So I am seeing a diverse amount of responses. That's awesome. So we have some, looks like we're having folks from all the different categories. I might just do some quick shout outs of some things people are sharing. Sarah says a resource a week for that kind of timely connection piece. I think that's awesome. Mariah might have some ideas to share in that way too. Community, incorporate them to the campus life, better communication, increase awareness. I really love that. Thank you. Just gonna keep going. Communication and empathy. Noah says, send out weekly emails to students about upcoming assignments, expectations. I think that's a great way of fostering both those things at once, that kind of consistency, and yet the kind of intention behind it also is with that empathetic piece of supporting students in their work. This is awesome. So y'all have really great strategies that you've already used. And so really our goal for today is to help take what you're already doing and maybe introduce new concrete things you can do. So I know what we'll be doing next is Mariah and I will kind of share a little bit about what we have done. And then we will also open the space for you all to share your perspectives too. So I will hand it back to Mariah. Oh, I think you're muted, Mariah. Sorry.
I am. Yeah, thank you so much, Brent. So what we wanted to do, like Brent said, was offer some really concrete ideas for you to take away, to adapt, to shift and use however you would like, however might fit in your courses, based on kind of some of the things that we've tried out and worked through that have really worked well for us. And so we're going to go through each of the 4 kind of categories and give some specific examples of things that we've done within our classes and our first year seminars and CAT communities. And then after that, we'll have a breakout session opportunity for you all to share some of your things that you've done or ideas that you have, and then tie that to some of those concerns that you highlighted at the beginning of the session. And then we'll come back together as a large group and talk through some of those. So we'll start with building community. So what does it look like to kind of build that community among your students, but also connect your students to you as well? A couple of the examples that I have. So one of the very first assignments that my students have is to meet with me in my office during the second week of class. So I want to make sure that not only are they getting to know each other, but they're getting to know me as well as a part of their classroom community. And I also want them to know where my office is because it's hard to find my office in the K-State First space. So I'm kind of back in a corner, right? And one of the first things that they say when they come back here is, oh, I didn't know this is where you were. And I was like, yes, exactly. And that's why this is an important meeting place. I want to make sure that they get used to kind of the space and the place where I'm at. And do students then come to my student hours regularly? No, not usually, but at least they know where they can find me when those student hours are available. I also begin each day of my class. So I go in early. So once the other class is finished, I'm there ready. Once everybody's out to set up for my course. And I ask a question that's up on the screen. So I have a different question every day that students answer I have a Discord set up. So they answer it in the Discord, and then I pull out a couple of the answers and we take like a minute or two at the beginning of class to chat about their answers for the question of the day. So a couple of examples: what's your good news for this week? Or if it's near Halloween, what's your favorite spooky season movie? And it just gets them used to using the technology, but also interacting with each other in kind of fun ways that aren't connected to the coursework specifically. And then co-curricular events. So getting connected outside of the classroom. Co-curriculars are a required part of the K-State First courses, but they're also memorable in and of themselves. And so if you want to integrate a co-curricular opportunity as part of your coursework, they're really powerful connection pieces. One of the ones that was my favorite and my students' favorite this year was going to Locked Manhattan. And so my students have a final project that they work on together in small groups. They have to create their own films. And so they actually went and did the escape rooms in their small project groups. And so they kind of figured out how they could solve problems together, who kind of was the sort of natural leader in the group, or natural leaders. A couple of them escaped, a couple of them didn't, but they all really had a great time. And I got all of my students to attend it, which was fun and a little bit different. Like, not necessarily all of them can attend the co-curricular events at the same time. Usually I have to have a makeup event for one or two, but they were all able to be there and they all made those connections. That one does cost money, but there are a lot of free events available on campus that you can integrate as a co-curricular opportunity. Example of kind of my daily question, I have a PowerPoint slide up giving them directions on what to do. I play music, or also have like a video playing at the same time. They answer the question. So this was, what is your favorite Wonder Woman? We were doing Wonder Woman at the time. That was the unit we were working on. They could answer with a GIF if they wanted. And then the answers in the Discord that some of my students shared. And then these are my students at Locked. And the ones that escaped, they had a lovely note to share with folks. So.
All right, y'all. Mariah is so much better design-wise than I am. So I don't have awesome pictures to tell you, but I have two good strategies to share with community building. So I think something that transfers from K-State First courses that you can use in whatever it is that community building is literally listed as an outcome for our class. And I think that the benefit of this is that we all can do community building in courses, but when it's literally on their syllabus as an objective, it gives you something to always go back to of, part of this course's purpose is that we're building a community together. And so on a really foundational level, I think that's a huge strategy that can be impactful. But further, when I'm thinking about community in my classroom, whether it's a community building event or activities that connect them to each other, I emphasize it from the very first day of class so that they know this is a space in which we will be building community. And it's becomes an expectation of what we do. From a structural perspective, I also think about timeliness of these activities. Day one for my teaching and my style and what I do in my spaces, it might not be the best place for like the deepest of conversations, right? So I think about structuring and scaffolding their experience with community so that by the end of the semester, a more in-depth or more vulnerable kind of community builder makes more sense because we've taken the time to kind of structure that from the beginning. So those are the two things that came to mind for me for what I do with my teaching practices.
Awesome. Thank you. So before we move on to communication and empathy, just a real quick check-in, and I'm going to put my boxes back up so I can see folks. Anybody have any questions about kind of those examples or any quick examples they want to share? And like I said, we'll have a breakout opportunity for you to dive a little bit more deeply if community building was one you wanted to focus on, but anything anyone wants to pop in with before we move to communication and empathy?
Mariah, I just wanted to say I stole your thing of having your students meet you in your office, and I'm trying it this semester.
Yeah.
And so I mean, to be determined, it's still week one, but I'll let you know how it goes. So thanks for that.
Excellent. Yeah. And actually a part of that assignment that I do is my students can ask me one question and it can be anything. Like it doesn't have to be related to the class. They can ask me what my favorite TV show is, what my favorite color is, like any and everything is open. And sometimes they do ask something about the class, like, so, tell me about the final project or whatever. But oftentimes it's random and out of the blue, and we have a really good conversation. And so like they get to know me as a person more than just like their professor, right? And so that is a fun part of the assignment if you want to use that component as well. But if you want to keep it more directly related to the course. But having them come in and have a purpose to meeting with you is important too as part of that.
So Mariah, I'm curious, I also teach a small class, but I know there's people in here who have like large classes.
Mhm.
Do you think this could scale up by like having groups come at the same time? And is there like an ideal number of people before the group becomes unwieldy? Because I'm thinking the benefit would be they could form a cohort within the larger class and then the professor's not burned out by having 300 students come, but I'm not sure if that's logistically possible.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't ever, the biggest group I've ever taught has been, I want to say 35 students has been the biggest class that I've ever taught. So I've always been able to teach and do that as a kind of a one-on-one thing. I love the idea of having like groups come and meet at certain times. And this isn't like a long meeting. It's like 5 minutes and that's it, right? And so it can be done like pretty quickly, and it's just an opportunity for a little FaceTime and for them to see like the space, right? And so I think, yeah, having like a group of 10 students come in and maybe like getting them connected in some way, like using technology and say, hey, have this group come up with a question, come talk to me at this time. And then, yeah, they're building that kind of connection and cohort already, right? And using like a Canvas assignment or a Canvas piece and then coming into the space, I think could be a possibility. But for folks who have taught larger classes, do you have any experience? Is it Andy? I think you have your hand up.
Yeah,
Right?
I have just responding to what Sarah was saying with the large classes. I have a colleague who regularly teaches very large classes. And so in all of her classes, she breaks the students into groups of like 10 about, and all of their assignments, discussion boards, everything are done with those same 10 students, so that they, even though they're in this like very large class of over 100 students, they feel like they get to know a certain group of people really well, and it feels like a more intimate class. And so I think that that's something that you could do. And she does it for her online classes too. So that's, even those students might be in, this enormous section of online, an online class with over 100 students, that they can like feel like they have that intimate environment of just like getting to know 10 people in the class. So that's a really good way to do things.
I love it. Yeah, having kind of those smaller cohorts, right, within the larger spaces.
I think that's great. And, Sarah, I heard the other question too about like, what's the right size? And, like, I think research and that's out there would say different things. And it, honestly, if y'all are thinking about scaling this, it might just be a capacity question, like, so with our learning assistant program, we have about 60 learning assistants that we train each year. And so we have meetings with them in clusters of about 4 to 5, because that's the capacity number that we could accommodate. So that might be a factor to the equation too, is what's manageable to you, but also like literally time wise, how much time do you have to meet? That might be just another thing to consider with it.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so kind of the next bucket and topic is communication and empathy. So a couple of the examples that I have is just get your students used to that you are communicating with them early and often and in a variety of ways, right? And so students probably aren't going to be checking their email frequently, if at all sometimes, right? And so finding different ways to communicate with them. And so I email my students, right? I send them messages on our class Discord. I use Canvas announcements. And so I try to get communication out to them in various ways. I make announcements in the class, right? And so if there's an assignment that's due, they know it in a variety of various ways, right? But also using like student language on the syllabus and assignments. So for example, having, rather than office hours, something like student hours on the syllabus, and then clarifying expectations. And so on my next slide, I'll talk a little bit about that. But this is a couple pages of what my syllabus looks like for my fiction and film class. And so really I try to model it off of kind of having a conversation with my students. And so in order to have a conversation with my students, I want to say things like, I'm here to help, right? And so I have contact information for myself on the very first page. I want to make sure they know how to get a hold of me if they need something, if they have questions. I have student hours rather than office hours, exactly when and where I'm available, that I am available by appointment if those don't work for them, right? And also that I want them to reach out for help, right? And so I'm not always going to know if they're struggling with something. And so I want to empower them to be able to reach out to me and create a space where they feel comfortable doing so. And then talking a little bit about like how our class works, right? And so I want to break it down for them exactly how we're meeting, what class looks like, where we'll be, and then a breakdown in how our schedule works within the course as well. And then for like clarifying expectations on assignments. So I have assignment guideline sheets that breaks everything down. I have how to get specific kinds of help for that assignment. I have the same information on our Canvas page. And then I also have rubrics for all of my assignments. So students can see exactly how the points are being counted and what I'm grading them on for specific components of each of those assignments. So I go over the expectations in class with them. I give them examples of the assignments that have maybe been done well, maybe been done not so well. We talk about them together and then go back to these over and over again and build up, especially some of the larger assignments like the final film project. Components of these are built in throughout the semester.
So when I was thinking about kind of communication piece, the first thing I thought of was what Noah shared in the chat earlier. As part of the courses I teach, I send regular and consistent reminders. And so it gives them, here's the expectation of when you will hear from me about kind of what to expect. And as Mariah mentioned with kind of syllabus versus Canvas page, making sure that they're consistent in that way as well. Another way when I was thinking about communication and empathy is that I make sure that that is adhering into my course policies as well. So my attendance policy is flexible in that it emphasizes that communication is the key piece. If they communicate, I'm able to excuse up to a certain number of absences, depending on what the class is and what that looks like. So the flexibility built into and connecting to communication, I think, is another strategy that I've seen work really well with my students.
So that was a little bit quicker than the last one, but other questions or points of clarification or things that you all would like to add before we move kind of to the next topic as far as communication and empathy? And I know like we have high expectations of our students to communicate with us, right? And so I think modeling it for them is really key as well. And so if we want them to communicate things that are going on in their lives, making it clear that we'll do the same thing is really important. So, all right. Okay, so technology and flexibility. So a couple of the examples for me were I still offer kind of a Zoom in option for my students if they need it. I am not great at hybrid teaching. I learned that in the COVID times. I struggle trying to teach things in class and on the computer, following the chat, following the discussion in person. But I make that clear to my students when they want to Zoom in or need to Zoom in because something comes up or they're not feeling well, but they do still want to follow along with the class discussions. That I'm gonna be paying primarily attention to what's going on in person, but I'm happy to still have them follow along with the PowerPoint presentation that I'm sharing and to try and pop in on the chat when I can to see what's going on. And I also utilize Google Slides a lot when we do kind of group work in class. And so since that's an option, then they can kind of use that as well from anywhere, right? And so they can join in on their group work at that point too. And so I do try to emphasize that if a student isn't feeling well, that maybe they should just rest and not attend class in any format, right? Because they should be sleeping and taking care of their health, and that's their number one priority. But sometimes they really do want to Zoom in, or they had to go home for something and they just couldn't make it back, and that's totally fine. And so I do still offer that option. Like I said, I use shared Google Documents for some of our collaborative in-class group work. And then I use a Discord server. So I don't know if you're familiar with Discord. It's kind of an application you can use. So this is what kind of my class Discord looks like. It's kind of an extension part of it of my syllabus and my Canvas page, in that I have a place for announcements, kind of useful info, how to contact me, spaces for expectations, where to go for homework help, school events that are coming up, resources, things like that. But then I also use it for specific discussions during class weeks. And so I pulled out kind of what my fiction to film class week channels look like. And so we did the Amanda Ripley author talk together. So we watched it all at the same time. And then we had a discussion. And so like in that channel, I asked questions and then I expected my students to answer it as we were watching the author talk together. And that's how they earned their attendance points for that. We also did a similar thing for a Star Wars movie watch together. And then each week I'll create that channel for the week. If I'm asking questions in class that I want them to kind of save that information to be able to go back to, so they can use it to potentially study for the exam, or use maybe for like one of their upcoming presentations or papers, then I'll ask a question that they'll put that information into the channel. It's not for every question that I ask in class, but it is a space where they can kind of save and go back to that information. And this is where the place where they answer those kind of daily questions in class as well. And then Google Slides. So I like to use these for some of our kind of small group work in class activities. One example is when we were studying Star Wars, I had them break into groups and look at different creators that were kind of responsible for the original Star Wars movie beyond George Lucas, right? And so they had to do really quick exploration of, for example, Ralph McQuarrie, who is an artist. And so they had 3 slides. They had to answer some specific questions about the person that they were assigned. They had to find a primary source, and then they had to share where they found their information on that. And so each group gets a certain number of slides. They're working on it together, and then they present to the whole class afterwards. But then you can see kind of the process that they're working through, which is really cool to see at the end.
So Mariah, Don actually had a really good question for you about Zoom. So he says, how are you doing with your Zoom attendees? I have found that it is much harder for them to engage on Zoom. Yeah, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, so their engagement is a little hit and miss. So like I can't get them, and it sort of depends on like what they're doing. And so I had like some of my students have to do like small group presentations, and I had to have a couple who zoomed in to do that. And so like they were there, they had their cameras on, they did their portion of the presentation, and it went fine, right? And it was because they had a family emergency, they had to be out of town. For like just like regular class stuff, they're not as engaged. And so like it's a black screen, their camera's off. If I do ask them like a specific question in the chat, they'll usually answer it. And then like if I do the Google Slides, they're usually engaged, I think. Their names are on the slides at least, but it's hard for me to tell because it's sort of anonymous, right, in the Google Slides. So it's like anonymous hippopotamus, and I can see that 4 students are in there. So I'm hopeful that all 4 of the group members are working on it, but I don't know exactly kind of what their engagement level is. I don't have a lot of students who use the Zoom in option, thankfully. Like it was very rare. I think I had maybe 4 students throughout the whole semester who ended up zooming in at one point or another.
So Mariah, if you'll indulge me a follow-up then,
Yeah.
I've had this experience, and a number of colleagues have had, that when we provided a Zoom option, many students took it.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of wondering how you're able to entice your students to come to class, even when they have this other option, because, you know, I was finding maybe a third were coming to class when they had the option to zoom in instead.
Yeah. I don't necessarily advertise it as like an option. So like I don't have it in my syllabus as like, hey, there's also this Zoom option kind of thing. If a student communicates with me and yeah, it's more kind of situational. And so
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's something where I had said a number of times, probably you can find recordings of me saying it in sessions like this, like, I'm going to keep going high flex. We're going to have this. It's been great. And then what I found is to get to a point where I found that the face-to-face experience, those students are having a much better, you know, kind of performance and outcomes and things like that. And now I'm back to full face-to-face. What I do is I record the stuff that I'm doing, and on a case-by-case basis, kind of like you're describing, I provide the recordings for asynchronous viewing as necessary.
Mhm.
But I like you're using it on a case-by-case basis and not just putting it out there as a choice.
Yeah, and it's not like I would like say yes to one student and no to another
Sure.
necessarily. Like if a student asks, like any student, I would probably say yes. Like there's not a time I would say like no to anyone necessarily if they communicated and asked for it. But yeah, it's not something that I necessarily, like I said, put on my syllabus or advertise as being like an option for like every other class or every week or something like that. It's much more of a use this rarely kind of thing, like in emergency situations or rare cases. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
I love that, because what I was hearing from both you, Mariah, and you, Dawn, was that you were using kind of this technology, either recording or Zoom in, as like a kind of built-in empathy moment as a teacher that's just into your structure. And that's kind of the way that I viewed my responses to this technology that I was going to share with you all as well. So I really thought about Canvas a lot. I think that my big growth areas in the past couple of years have been related to how I design and implement my Canvas pages, totally different than pre-pandemic. So I think a big thing that I've learned is that Canvas pages can be very overwhelming. And it's important for us to think about what is essential and what is not. And so I know that I go to the extreme. My Canvas pages are very minimalistic. I usually have just 3 tabs of the most critical things that they need. So I think from a design perspective, and I know our Course Design Institute that I know a lot of us have attended has helped with that as well. But just think about, what do I want them to see? What's going to confuse them? And work from there. I think that the biggest friend, I know a lot of us probably know this, is the student view button. Utilize that button to help us see exactly what students see from their perspective when they look at your page. And if there's something that feels confusing or that feels unnecessary, I think that's a good flag of maybe that's something that we can remove from the page or that we can revise for a different way. Another kind of technology thing I was thinking about was just the use of PowerPoint or whatever learning materials you have for class. So I really value having that posted in advance. Like Mariah was saying, Mariah unlocks modules each week for her students. That's kind of what I think about with mine as well. So I have kind of those PowerPoints posted in advance so that different types of learning styles, some students really like to kind of follow along as they go. And so that's something that I found beneficial. But kind of like just as a general philosophy or a general tactic, I think about that Canvas page can be really leveraged as a place for any materials that you need for class. Or like a Discord or whatever your style is for your teaching. So having everything out there for them, anything they'll need to use for engaging in that day's activities are posted and are there for them. And I found a lot of success in clarity and in students understanding kind of what was going on for that day. So those are the 2 things I thought about, really from that techie kind of Canvas side.
Awesome. Any other questions or things to add before we move to kind of that final topic? Yeah, Andy.
I just wanted to, I like what Brent was saying, because I used to like want to add all this like extra, like, here's, if you're interested in this topic, like, here's this, here's that. And like, yeah, I found the same thing. Students were really overwhelmed. And so one of the things that I do now is that I also post my PowerPoints to class. All of those extraneous things that I used to keep in Canvas, I now put in the notes section of each slide. And so if there's it's like, if you're interested in this topic, if you want to use this for your final paper, if this is something that you want to continue exploring, here's some additional readings. And so that all that material is then filtered. They first see Canvas and it's separated by week. And so it's like, okay, this is the assignment I have to do. And here's the PowerPoint from class, like very streamlined, very easy. And then if they saw something in class that they liked, they can go back to that specific slide to find more information rather than have it be the overwhelming Canvas.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. I've heard of that as a really great strategy, because it's kind of built into where they remembered getting it from in some ways. So I love that. And another one that made me think of too is just a different strategy of like having just like a important information module or like a resources module. So it's like you were saying, Andy, like it's separated. It's keeps the page clear and easy for students to follow. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, another thing with kind of Canvas navigation, right? And so like I have, like Brent said, and he does, is like the weekly modules, right? And so like weekly, this is the assignment due for the week. This is what we covered in class for the week, right? And that only comes up that week, right? And then the next one is released each week. But then I also have like the major assignment module, right? And so that has the assignment guidelines, and it's got the Canvas guidelines, and then like the rubric. And so it's all in that like one place, right? And so students can go back to it, and that's at the very top, right? And so easy for them to access and navigate to. Yeah, Sarah.
So one thing that I think is really important to remember is not to underestimate how little our students know about how Canvas and those things work. And it's not taught officially in any class. So I think it does not hurt to first class or probably second class or something, just go over even the basics of like, this is how you change your settings so that maybe you do get an email notification, things like that. Personally, that also forced me to go into the student view and see what they were seeing, because if I had to explain it to them, I had to know what it looked like, and that made me change some of my setup. But there's no formal place where our students are getting this introduction. And I've had students, this was actually literally the topic of my dissertation. I had students who did not know what at that time, what were we calling it back then? It was pre-Canvas. What did we call it before it was Canvas?
K-State Online.
K-State Online or
And it was
K-Sol.
awesome.
Yes, but everybody called it something different. And so students didn't know that when somebody said K-State Online or K-Sol or KSOL, that it was all the same thing. So just keep that in mind, as many of your students have no clue how this functions or what they're supposed to be doing in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if there are specific ways that you want them to use Canvas for your class, then show them, right? Be really specific. And yeah, so I have like to do, so like students can see exactly what's due, and it shows up in their to-do list on my Canvas page. And so like I highlight that for my students and make sure that that's showing up in their settings. And so they know exactly what's due and when for their assignments, and it's easily accessible on their homepage for my course. So awesome. Anything else before we move to kind of that final topic? All right, excellent. Okay, so the last one is timely connection to resources. So I have what I call Resource Fridays, and it's exactly like it sounds. Every Friday in my class, I take about 5 minutes at the very beginning to highlight a different resource on campus. So everything from like the Writing Center to the LGBT Resource Center to Levine CAPS, anything and everything that I think might potentially be helpful to students. But I do try to time it to what might be relevant to kind of what's going on in my course. And so students have paper that's due kind of early on in the semester. And so I try to time the Writing Center Resource Friday to be a week or maybe a couple weeks, usually a week, because I know when they'll be writing their paper. It's probably not 2 weeks before it's due. To talk about the Writing Center, because that's sort of the time of need and when they're going to be thinking about it, right? Talking about Levine CAPS might be helpful around like October, when they're starting to really feel homesick, right? And so thinking about kind of that student time of need. And then when I talk about experts, right, and connecting to expertise, I definitely think about the library and our librarians, right? And so I took my students to the library twice this semester, which was fantastic. So they had a library research day with Sarah, which was awesome. And then I had them do an innovation lab scavenger hunt. So they had to go throughout the innovation lab. They used the One Button Studio, they used the Makerspace, and then they had to go through and answer questions about all of the other resources that were available to them. I also have them do kind of a campus-wide scavenger hunt where they go to different buildings on campus and talk about and answer questions about their various resources that are available as well. And so like where the LGBT Resource Center is, right? Where career services is, so that they know and are aware and can like take the actual pathways to those places. So for example, Resource Friday that I had is Cat's Cupboard. So I provided some of that information, and then Cat's Cupboard actually has a video. So I shared that video in class. And on my Canvas page, anytime I do Resource Friday, I have a Resource Friday module on my Canvas. So I update it with that information to those resources as well. And then this was some pictures from their Innovation Lab scavenger hunt. And those were their 10-minute makerspace creations, which turned out fantastic. I love them. I would have kept them, but I gave them back to the groups. So hopefully one or two of them actually kept it because it was fantastic.
So when I was thinking about resources for me, and I know a lot of you probably think about this with these 4 topics, there are so many interesting intersections here. So when I was thinking about resources, one of the main ways I think about it, outside of moments like Mariya described, where you have like a resource day or intentional times in the class built in, I think about resources at an individual level. And granted, I do teach classes that are smaller in size, so there's different ways this would or would not scale. But I think about when I meet with them one-on-one, I have intentional questions built out that helps surface if there is a resource need of some sort. Questions like how are you feeling in terms of like study skills and how those are developing, and the like. And what those kind of intentional questions can do is help us as instructors see, here might be a need and here's maybe something we can recommend. Whether that's academic coaching, lifting caps, all of the different amazing resources on campus. Oftentimes those one-on-one moments are how we can determine what those look like. But there are also ways to do that on a larger scale. If there are like, check-in assignments or opportunities for feedback from students that you could do on a global scale, even in a lecture space, those can be ways to then build in some connections to what resources are needed for the class, or they might help you tailor that Resource Friday, for example, based on the feedback from your students. And then the final thing that I was thinking about, much like Mariya described as well, is that linking on Canvas those resources can be really powerful. I know I shared a little bit ago, I have kind of a resources module on mine, so there's just kind of one space that they go to see them. So having them there, having it in the syllabus as well, as multiple areas where students can potentially get to those resources, because we know some students are like, I'm wed to the syllabus. That's where I'm going to get all my stuff from. Others are like, no, it's the resources module on Canvas. Others, it's I'm going to ask Brent specifically, and then he will tell me. So making sure we have all the different venues for providing that information to them, I think can be pretty valuable. So those were what I was thinking about in terms of resources.
All right. Well, we had a great discussion, so we don't really have time for like breakouts, but we still have time for kind of discussion. And so are there some activities that you've used before, and what have been some of that impact? And I can stop sharing if we just want to chat with one another about some of those things. I can see people.
I have a question about one of the previous things I wanted to ask, but I guess I just waited. It was the one, about empathy. I don't know if that's the actual category. So I try to be really empathetic, and I worry, and I just worry I might just not even notice it, because I try to be as understanding as possible. But is there a line where you think maybe students will be taking advantage of you or of your kindness? And what is that? Because I don't, even though I tell them, like, for example, like, hey, there's late penalties, I actually don't ever take off. But at some point, like, is it like, am I not helping them build a skill if I am too lenient? I guess is also the other kind of part of that.
Yeah, that's an amazing question. And I'm someone who I live in the it depends world a lot, with the things I'm interested research wise and teaching wise. So I think that my response probably is the unhelpful it depends. I think all of us have a different teaching philosophy, and that comes with kind of the standards that we expect and the ways that we provide flexibility. And so my answer probably is at first like a look within to kind of what your own philosophies in your teaching are, to build from there. I agree, Don. It works no matter what, doesn't it? It's a versatile response, but yeah, I don't know what you're thinking, Mariah.
Yeah, I mean, it depends 100%. Yeah. And I think you can also, with experience, tell if a student is trying to take advantage of you. And so I am very empathetic, but at this semester, I was sort of pushed to my brink by a student. And like I had like a student who came to like the first couple weeks of classes and then just disappeared, right? And like I reached out and I was worried and I made like all kinds of points of contact and like got the RA to check on this student and my RLA and Office of Student Life, and like everybody was like, this student is alive and still doing studenty things. And I was like, okay, great, well maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my class, that's fine, whatever. Sometimes we don't connect. Cool. And then at the end of the semester, guess who emailed me to see if they could pass my class? And I was like, I have not seen you for 14 weeks. What? Like, it's the audacity for me at that point, right? And so like I have my limits to empathy, right? And so like I had been reached, that they were reached at that point. But a lot of times, like through communication, like if a student is like keeping me up to date about what their situation is, like we can work through a lot of different things. And I am more than willing to do that. But I also understand, like, I am working with 20 students, right? Or 22 students versus like a large class of 100 to 300 students. And so like you can't kind of have the same, like you kind of have to have a line on kind of what you're able to be flexible on with some of those things. And so I am able to be flexible on some things with my smaller class size that those who teach a larger classes just aren't. And so, yeah.
I'm going to interject there because we are just about out of time. So if you would join me for thanking our wonderful presenters, Mariya and Brent Weaver, for today.
Oh, I left it on kind of a downer. All of my students were wonderful. I loved my students.
What I really appreciate about what both of y'all talked about today is you provided operational and practical things to do. I think sometimes, people stay at the kind of, 10,000 foot level and be like, well, what do I do tomorrow? I think you were really good at modeling things I could do tomorrow in my class to achieve those 4 different areas of growth that we can all do in our teaching. So I really do appreciate that. For those of you who had as much fun at this as I did, please do a post survey form on this. Noah has just dropped that into the chat. Also let you know, again, Dr. Camilla Roberts from our Office of Integrity is going to come next week to talk about some issues that are really the dark side, I think, sometimes about education. So we'll spend some time on that next week. And so, as we talked about before, same bat time, same bat channel, Wednesdays at noon, or watch asynchronously archived on the TLC website. But I hope you all have a wonderful start to your semester, and thank you for spending some time with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks.